Well, hello everybody, this is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to your critique of the week for Friday, May 28th. Thanks so much for joining me. Always a pleasure. Hello to Sally Dunn and Dee Coleman over on YouTube. Let's see who we got so far. Over on Facebook, we got James DeCillo. Got 10 other people waiting to join in. Well, it's always a pleasure to do these Critique of the Week episodes, and today's poet is Pritish Bhanushali. But first, let me let you know that at the end of the show, we're going to be doing our drawing to see who the next month's participants are. This is the last Critique of the Week for the month of May, and so June's coming up. We'll pick how many Fridays in June? There are 4 Fridays in June, so we'll pick 4 more poets. And hey, Cindy Botha and Richard Westheimer, good to see y'all too. So that will be what we'll do after the critique. But before we begin that, I should say that the whole purpose of this critique, if you're new, is to give that workshop experience to people that's so valuable. If you have a writing community, or if you have a MFA program or something like that, it's really great to sit around and talk about what works in a poem and what doesn't, and how readers are confronting what you wrote, because it's really hard to do that unless you have some kind of strangers looking at you in the way that a reader would, and then giving you some honest feedback. And that's the whole point here. So please do leave your comments in the notes. I'll try to share as many of them as I can as we go through. Now here is today's first poem. We got 2, and here's this one is. This is Ocean Inside, The Ocean Inside My Heart. Again, the poet is Pritish Bhanushali. And let me actually, before I do that, I always forget, because I do have the option, if you have any specific questions, I'll pass them along. And I also, if you have any Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or something page you want me to share, I'll do that too. So let me see where. Here we go. Okay, so no questions. Just the submission, the pair of poems here were called "The Fragrance of Life," was like a sort of combined title, and then there's 2 here. The Ocean Inside My Heart. The ocean inside my heart. Oh wait, let me put this up too. Oh, there I am. The ocean inside my heart. As my mind walked into a silent cave, I heard the sound of your mystical waves. Like a mad wanderer, I am trying to find you. I know nothing except one thing, that only you are true. While looking for you, I even got lost. Only in your thirst, so many deserts I crossed. Your water is sweet, even though you are an ocean. Only you hold the power to quench my thirst of devotion. I walked on so many paths, yet couldn't find the right one. I stopped on a ridge for a moment to be silent, and suddenly the sound of waves got stronger. Tired, I stayed on the ridge crying for you. My love and pain got molded together and created a moon strong enough to pull you. So I opened my eyes, a blast occurred. You were coming towards me with a huge wave, and I whispered, if only for you have I endured. In a blink, within you I got concluded, I got lost, and only you remained. So this is one of those poems back before I even started. I guess right when I started working at Rattle in 2004, which would be 17 years ago. The previous editor was Stella Sue Lee, and she always talked about these you poems, which I would call this a you poem, because everything is the you, and we don't know who the you is. So who is that is the first question. And that's sort of the question that resounds through the whole poem, right? I mean, is you God? Is you some kind of romantic relationship? Is you a parent or sibling? I mean, we don't know who you is. I mean, and then we just spend the whole time we spend with this poem, we end up just trying to guess who the you is. And so there's this tendency to use you in poetry. But if you do, which was the point Stella Sue was always making, you have to be really clear about who the you is, because sometimes you can be I and you're talking to yourself. Sometimes, I mean, the speaker of the poem is talking to themselves. Sometimes it's like a specific address to a certain person. And sometimes it's God. Sometimes it's like a prayer. There's just a whole sort of the subject is, the ambiguity in the subject is sort of endless with a you poem. And because of that, it's really hard to get attached to the poem. And that's kind of what we have here. So I'm not sure what to make of it because of the you and the fact that that's never resolved. So that's the first thing. So who is you? And then the ocean inside my heart is the title. And so the ocean inside my heart is sort of a sentimental type title. Heart is a word that I would sort of avoid whenever possible in poems. There's certain words that are just sort of have a lot of sentimentality to them, and they make it feel like, I don't know, you don't expect something fresh and original when you have words like inside my heart, phrases like that. But the ocean inside my heart is at least unusual, You don't usually think of an ocean in there and how would it fit, So that's a little bit interesting. As my mind walked into a silent cave, I heard the sound of your mystical waves. So we have the waves, caves. There's rhyme throughout this poem. It starts out with a couplet here that's rhymed, and then it sort of continues as the stanzas get longer. The rhymes get a little farther apart sometimes. But there's this sort of rhyming that's set up here. As my mind walked into a silent cave. So then you have to wonder, how literal are we being with this? My mind walked into a silent cave. So there's an ocean inside the heart, inside the you in the silent cave. It's sort of hard to place all of those things in something real. So we have to figure that's figurative. I heard the sound of your mystical waves. Like a mad wanderer, I'm trying to find you. I know nothing except one thing, that only you are true. We need some punctuation, maybe a hyphen there. But then the you, and then only you are true. So we have this rhyming still, so which is an expectation that we're arranging here. While looking for you, I even got lost. Only in your thirst, so many deserts I crossed. And so here, the rhyme, the syntax is forced in a way to make the rhyme. So, you wouldn't end this phrase on crossed unless you were trying to make the rhyme happen here. So it's the first time we feel that. It doesn't feel natural. It feels forced in to fit the rhyme scheme, which is what you want to avoid. You want to have poems, if you're going to use rhyme in poems, you want it to feel completely natural, as if you aren't even trying to rhyme. And so only in your thirst, so many deserts I crossed. Normally you'd say I crossed so many deserts, and you would end on desert, but then it wouldn't rhyme. So you'd flip this. And that makes the poem feel forced, as if it's, something you're really trying to make the rhyme work, instead of, we're sort of getting distracted by the fact that you wrote a poem basically at this point. Your water is sweet, even though you are an ocean. Only you hold the power to quench my thirst of devotion. So here, devotion, I'm wondering again, I'm trying to decode this poem still as I go through. And the more and more I read it, the more I think it's a spiritual poem to God. That would be what my guess is. But it might not be. I don't know. Your water is sweet, even though you are an ocean. So the ocean of the you apparently is inside my heart. So it might be like a love interest. I'm not sure. I walked on so many paths, yet couldn't find the right one. I stopped on a ridge for a moment to be silent, and suddenly the sound of waves got stronger. So here we get an actual sort of scene building for the first time. Up here, at first my mind walked into the silent cave. That's so abstract that it's hard to tell what that actually means. But here we actually get a scene, in the fact that the speaker was sort of in a cave and then ends up on a ridge is sort of a question mark. But feel how it feels a little bit more solid when we get up to this ridge, because here we can start to sort of have a scene play out in our minds as we're reading. So I stopped on a ridge for a moment to be silent, and suddenly the sound of waves got stronger. And so this is actually like, you can imagine a figure on a ridge, and then the waves roaring of the ocean nearby getting louder. And so we're starting to get pulled in at that moment. And so see how important scene is to a poem. To know where we're situated within the poem as we're reading it lets us sort of lose ourselves within that landscape that the poet is creating. So I think we get drawn in a little bit more on this spot, even though we lost the rhyme, right? Because there's no rhyme here for the first time. I'm tired. I stayed on the ridge crying for you. My love and pain got molded together and created a moon strong enough to pull you. As I opened my eyes, a blast occurred. You were coming towards me with a huge wave, and I whispered, only for you I have endured. So again, this huge wave, just the fact that it's like an image that we can see it play out in our minds, makes it a stronger part of the poem. Just that little bit, just a huge wave. That's how important images are in poems. In a blink within you, I got concluded. Now, this phrase "got concluded" is awkward, I would say. Just "got concluded" isn't a phrase that it would use. I got lost, and I wonder if it's for the repetition of the "got lost" later. And only you remained. And again, who? So this whole poem, we're just left wondering who this is. You know, who is the you? What do we make of this poem? Can you guys hear that? I think my neighbor is trying to fix his ATV. He just drove off. Okay, never mind. So, anyway, so I'm, I just don't know what to make of the poem because we don't know what's really going on. And so that's why, sort of meaning and emotion always live in specificity and concrete detail. Because if you don't know the situation, you don't know what the context is, if you can't create a scene in your head, if you don't know who the speaker is speaking to, it's just, it's hard to know what to do with a poem. And if you don't know what to do with a poem, like psychologically and emotionally, how to react to it, then you don't really feel anything after reading it. And so that's the problem. I'm lost as to who the you is. So like I was saying at the beginning, this is a you poem, and this is the problem with you poems. If you do write a poem as an address, and you want the you want it to be a poem addressing someone, whether it's God, whether it's someone in a relationship or something like that, use the title at least, or something very early on in the first line, so we know who is being addressed. Even if it was like, if you put this as Dear God is the title or first line, right? Then we would know who the you is. Now, that wouldn't be a problem, and we'd be able to situate ourselves within the poem. But because we don't know who, we just don't know what to take from this. Let me see what people are saying about this poem now. Catherine Swanson says, like the title, it's intriguing. Dave Murphy says, wonderful poem. Aaron Cloyd says, I would love to hear some more specific details throughout. Deserts, water, ridges are too vague for me. Yeah. I do like the tide pulling. This is James Cicillo. I do like the tide pulling towards the poet. Some energy here. Yeah, this is the spot right here. And then continuing through to about here when the wave comes. This is the spot where it seems like there's a sort of a concrete heart to the poem. And so there's nothing wrong with writing completely figuratively and completely using extended metaphor and making a scene that's just like sort of allegorical for what you're really talking about. And if you want to do that with this poem, that part on the ridge is concrete enough. There's a little bit of there's some life there. Some energy here is how James Cicillo put it. And yeah, you can feel the energy in this little section just because it's a bit of a scene that's being played out. Susan Talley thinks the you is the heart. So the heart being personified is Susan Talley's guess. The ocean inside my heart. So I heard the sound of my heart's mystical waves. So if that is the case, you can just get rid of the you because you don't gain anything except for confusion by it. So if this was, then you could just say my heart every time, right? So let's read the poem just a little bit that way and see both how it sounds, how the fact that it sounds better, even if that's not the right interpretation, and just how you do it, but the difference that it makes, not using you, right? So as my mind walked into a silent cave, I heard the sound of my heart's mystical waves. Like a mad wanderer, I'm trying to find my heart. I know nothing except for one thing, that only my heart is true. Well, looking for my heart, I even got lost. Only in my heart's thirst, so many deserts crossed. So, using my heart over and over again, it has its own issues that come up. But you can still feel how just having that little more concrete grasp of like a real object, or a real subject, I should say, I guess, makes the poem a little stronger. So if it is heart, you could just say that. Of course, you would replace it with it a lot, so you don't have to say my heart over and over again, but you know what I mean. And if it was here, my heart is sweet, even though my heart is an ocean. So that would work too. I don't know if that's the interpretation of it either. So Aaron Cloyd says, if the cave is silent, would it still have the sound of waves? And the waves are inside, it's the mind walking into the silent cave too. So is that a physical place? I don't know. Let's see. So Sherry Pasta is the possessive before waves. Where's the possessive before waves? Well, whatever. She says the possessive before waves might suggest that the poem is addressed to the ocean itself. Does that work with anything else? Yeah. Or I was thinking of sort of like a naturalistic god, like the god of nature or something. Like just that nature sort of personified as a god. I think that's the most likely interpretation of the you, just in my reading of it. But I'm not sure. Let's see. So J.R. Parsons says, good private poem. You knows who he or she is. I like the rhymes and don't necessarily think you should give up on them. Think about the big picture. How can you use more natural language in order to hit these end rhymes? Yeah, that's true too. So Mark A. Grinier says, this may be devotional, but it's too private to be clear. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of all we would say. We don't really have a whole lot to go on with this poem. Other than make it more clear so we know what's actually going on so we can connect as readers to it. If it's a poem that you're just writing for yourself in a journal, or if it's a poem that you're just writing to give to somebody specific, if the you is a specific person, then these kind of poems work. But for an audience, like a third party watching from the stands, where it just doesn't, we don't know how to connect with it. So if it's something you were to try to publish for an audience of readers, there has to be a way to make it clear what you're talking about and who the you is. That's the main thing. And then the other things are just to make the rhymes not feel so forced. Like so many deserts I crossed. Other places too. Even though I don't know if you'd use devotion unless it rhymed with, like a rhyme should feel like this. When I got to the you are an ocean to quench my thirst of devotion, it feel like you were using the devotion only because it was a word that fit like you were writing toward this rhyme instead of it sort of just popping up spontaneously, which is how you really want a rhyming poem to feel. You want the rhymes to be sort of unexpected and not, the sense that they're not being written toward that rhyme on purpose. Because really the whole point of writing a poem for other people to read is to have this suspension of disbelief where we forget for a moment who we are and we inhabit the voice of someone else. And if there's ever the sense that a poem is being written and somebody is trying to put us in that place instead of just letting us go there, then it sort of pulls you out of the poem. I mean, it's sort of like breaking the fourth wall, as you'd say in theater. And so, because as soon as you see somebody writing toward a rhyme, then you're reminded that this is a poem that someone's trying to pull me in with instead of just letting yourself be pulled in, if that makes sense. Okay, let's look at the other poem. I don't know if this has the same issues or not. We'll see. This one is Breath. And again, the poet is Pritish Bhanushali. So close you are, yet so ignorant I am. Everything starts with you and ends with you. yet I think so big I am. Whenever you want, you can take me, yet I think in my control is everything. You're everywhere and I am nowhere, yet I think I am a knowledgeable being. You are the one closest to me, yet I don't even have time to feel you come in. I am from you and not the other way around, yet I keep on conquering things as if they will always belong to me. You keep going when I am asleep, and I ask, am I really awake even when I am not asleep? My ignorance doesn't stop you from gifting me life every morning. I thank you, my breath, as with every moment a journey you bring. So now I'm starting to think, maybe this poem is about the ocean, or my heart. Because this seems like it's actually sort of like a devotional piece to my breath. And that's who the you is. And so it seems like it's sort of, what's the word? I'm personifying my breath, the breath itself into a person. And I think that's who the you is. But still, notice that you, like when we get here, we get the poem is called Breath with an exclamation mark. And actually, I kind of find it interesting. You don't see many poems with an exclamation mark. I kind of like that. But still, when we get to the you, so close you are, and yet so ignorant I am. So we still have to wonder who the you is. At the end, you sort of thank you, my breath. So you address the you, and then I guess it's revealing that you is my breath. But we don't know that until we get to that line. And so we're still sort of struggling and going through the same things, trying to figure out who the you is. And that's how we're wasting all our mental space and the ability to connect with the poem. We're wasting trying to be a detective, figuring out who the you is. So again, if you're going to use you have to let the audience know who you is early on, because otherwise it just doesn't work. Yet so ignorant I am. Everything starts with you and ends with you. Yet I think so big I am. And again, we have the I am to get a rhyme, I think. Maybe not, but it's this awkward, so big I am is an awkward phrase there. Whenever you want, you can take me. Yet I think in my control is everything. You are everywhere and I am nowhere. Yet I think I am a knowledgeable being. So there's a lot of abstract and vagueness here. And I don't know, there's not a whole lot to connect with, because there's no image, there's no scene playing in your head. Whenever you want, you can come, and we're still wondering who the you is too as we're reading the stanza. So we're sort of left with nothing to hold on to. Whenever you want, you can take me, yet I think in my control is everything. You're everywhere and I am nowhere, yet I think I am knowledgeable being. You are the one closest to me. It almost feels like a riddle, you know? There's sort of a riddle aspect, like we're trying to figure out who the you is, and that's sort of the structure of the poem. You are the one closest to me, so your breath is like right there, inside you. Yet I don't even have time to feel you come in. I am from you and not the other way around, so I'm from my breath. Yet I keep on conquering things as if they will always belong to me. You keep going even when I am asleep, and I ask, am I really awake even when I am not asleep? My ignorance doesn't stop you from gifting me life every morning. I thank you, my breath, as with every moment a new journey you bring. So this sort of, this kind of ending feels like, it's telling us what the you is. And it's setting that up as if that's like the conclusion of the poem, the sort of the reveal of the riddle that we've been waiting for. And that's not enough. That's not what we want from poetry. To have a riddle that we solve. We want to, the purpose of poetry is to step inside of somebody else. Because the rhythms of your breath become the rhythms of my breath, and I become you for a moment, the speaker. as I'm reading the poem, and that's that intimate connection. And then we want to feel what you feel and learn something about that perspective on human existence. And so this is set up as a riddle, and then it resolves the riddle, and it doesn't leave you anything going. It doesn't leave you with anything that you can learn from it, except for what you were withholding in the first place. So the question is, and what really a poem like this should be striving for is, why am I writing a poem about breath? Like, what is it that makes that a compelling topic for me? Like, there was a reason this poem was created, and that actually is the sort of meaning that we're sort of missing in the poem, if that makes sense. Like I don't know, what I'm saying is I think we want more of the poet in the poem here, and that'll I think that's the most interesting thing, is like what compelled the poet to write about breath. If it was thing, of course, during the pandemic right now, just for an example, right, where we're all, everybody on ventilators and all the difficulty breathing with the bilateral pneumonia and whatever, and so there's sort of a sense of the value of breath that we have now that might have been missing, that we took it for granted until the pandemic, and that might have been what compelled the poem to be written. But if that is what comes out as the conclusion, like what made me write this poem instead of just what was I actually writing about, that's the interesting thing, I think. So anyway, let me see. So Sarah Frente says that the poem is about the breath. It could definitely be more powerful. Aaron Clyde says, if it is a spiritual poem, I get that God or the divine can't be fully portrayed in language, but the poem still needs to bring in the reader and help them see and experience at the same level or specificity as the author. Tierra Paulson says, do you see a lot of submissions with breath as the subject? I'm actually excited to see this title. I'd love to see a surprising metaphor for the breath. That I mentioned the pandemic because in the last year we have gotten a lot of poems about breath itself, and originally we hadn't. It was something that poets seem to like I said, take for granted and not really pay much mind to. But there are a whole bunch of poems and submissions over the last year that they're sort of just praise songs for the fact that I have breath and that that all the mechanical functions of the body work, and I don't know. And then there's sort of there's some spiritual type poems about breath too that come up. Marky Grenier says speech is breath in many ways. It is, yeah. The quotes in these seem more natural than the rest. The quotes. Oh yeah. So down here, am I really awake even when I'm not asleep? But it never closes. So I think maybe it just should have closed there. What else do we have? So James Tassilo with a suggestion. He says, our breath is so varied, short of breath, breathing peacefully, etc. Could there be a more deep exploration of breath? Yeah, that's a good direction that could go, like just exploring breath itself, and how does the breath change over time based on what I'm looking at? There's a lot of things you could explore more deeply here that could be interesting. Let's see. Let's see. Let me go over to YouTube. Does anybody... Okay, so over on YouTube, which I didn't flip over before. Cindy is talking about personal poems more than public ones, and yeah, that's the kind of thing. I think we already addressed this, but Cindy beat us to it. And that both these poems are that sort of private feel, where they don't feel intended for an audience. They don't really let us in too much. Richard Westheimer says, I think each of these, heart, breath, ocean, are meant to be metaphors, substitutes for some god. Yeah, I wonder about that too. There are little hints of that throughout both poems. And let's see. Terry R. says the poem needs to be that new journey for the reader. And Richard Westheimer agrees with that. And then Cindy says, poem 2 has the problem of no sense of discovery for the poet, hence none for the reader. Yeah, that's a good way to put it too, always. The reason, because the poet knows the only reveal, like I said, is the you is my breath. And we get some kind of conclusion from that. The ambiguity of it is resolved at the end. But the poet already knew that. So it's not surprising for the poet. But what would be surprising, what I was trying to get at before, is the question of why I was compelled to write this poem in the first place. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you want to explore. And really, that's the kind of thing that you explore with every poem. Every poem is fundamentally is an exploration of, like, why did I want to write this? Like, what was it that was interesting or gnawing at me? What didn't make sense in this experience? And then you find the way to make sense of it through the process of writing the poem. And that's like a journey into chaos that you get to pull back and give to us as like a map for our own lives. And that's kind of what poetry is. It was kind of what all art is. And so it needs to be a journey of discovery for the creator of the art that then you can transfer onto us. And if it's just resolving an ambiguity that you left in the poem to start with, that's not really a journey into anything. Hang on a second. I usually turn this phone off. Let's see. And we're just going to turn it off. Okay. Would you stop here? I'm not good with phones. Okay. I guess that button makes it stop. Okay. So I think that's all we can say about these two. Thanks so much for sharing these. Once again, the poet was Pritish Bhanushali. Thanks for sharing these two, Breath and The Ocean Inside My Heart. It's always a pleasure. It's just always fun picking apart and going through poems in this kind of detail. And of course, the whole point of this is to show, in addition to doing the workshop thing, it's to show what the reaction really is. Because usually if you submit poems to Rattle or any other magazine, all you get is a yes or no, And so this tells you why it would have been a yes or a no, so that's one of the reasons too. People always ask for feedback. I can't do it very often, but I can do once a week, and that's what the critique of the week is. So let us see who the next round of customers is going to be on the old critique of the week. Now, once again, I have a list going. I think there were 125 in there, and we'll see in a second. But it's everybody who went to Rattle. You can go to rattle.com/critique. Is that right? Is it rattle.com? Let me see what the actual URL is. If you go to rattle.com, up in the on the content, there's critique of the week. It is critique, yeah. Rattle.com/critique. Here, I'll put it on the screen, actually. So this is the page. If you click here, see, this is the critique of the week page. If you click here, you can submit. You can submit 2 poems, and you can change it after you run the drawing. But then we do a drawing, and we have 125, I think, or something like that, names in the drawing. And then I go over to random.org. This is the random.org list randomizer. We will paste in all those people, so you can see your name there if you entered. Everybody's actually in there. And then I just go down a little bit and click randomize. And there we are. Nancy Iannucci's number 1. That'll be next week. And then Hope Moira, Nancy Sabanek. I think Xavier Pimentel might have already done it once. I'll have to go back and look. So maybe we'll go to Cherise Solomé Boyson. If Xavier, so I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to do it. And I think we already did Xavier, but maybe not. I'll double check. So, but then those will be the 4. Either Nancy, Hope, Nancy, and Xavier, or Nancy, Hope, Nancy, and Cherise. And that is your critique of the week. Hope you enjoyed it. I always have a good time. And this week on the Rattlecast, I just want to remind everybody that we're shifting gears a little bit, changing up the structure. The Rattlecast itself is going to be Sunday. This is the usual time for Poets Respond Live. We're blending Poets Respond Live and the Rattlecast into one show, which will be just a little stronger, get a little bigger audience, and we'll get the great Poetry Spawn poems that we do into the iTunes podcast version. So I think it'll be a lot more fun. We're going to start a half an hour early. So we're going to start out with Poetry Spawn Live at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Then I'll take a quick break just to connect and call in with Supriya Kaur Dhaliwal, our poet this week, our featured guest at 12 Eastern. Her book is The Yak Dilemma. She's in India, which is why we're doing the show in the morning. Normally it will be 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 Eastern to start, and we'll do it the same way. And so we'll have half an hour for Poetry Spawn Live, an hour with a featured poet. Then we'll have open lines for as long as we want to do open lines. And that'll be Rattlecast number 95, Sunday, May 30th. Starting at, again, 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend until then. And I will talk to you soon. Goodbye.